The village where we stayed was around 45 minutes from the historic seaside town of Whitby. The drive didn't seem that long though, because there was so much beautiful countryside and the amazing moorland to keep us occupied. At one point, we even saw a steam train chugging through the valley, which was very picturesque. This is a popular scenic tourist route, and due to the nature of the roads, there's no way to avoid it. Be prepared for some delays in the summer. This was September and it was still really busy. The reason we were heading for Whitby was to experience the dramatic ruins of the Abbey on the cliff top, and also so that my parents could visit places where my ancestors had lived around 200 years ago. We had the dogs with us, so unfortunately we couldn't go into the church or the museum. Whitby is a large town on the east coast of Yorkshire. It's also the mouth of the River Esk, which runs through the centre out to the sea. When we visited there were extensive roadworks and we had to follow a diversion to reach the Abbey. The town itself is a collection of historic buildings, some over 400 years old. It has a rich maritime history, and the first settlement was recorded as early as 656 AD. Whitby Abbey was a 7th century Christian monastery that later became a Benedictine abbey. The abbey and its possessions were confiscated by the crown under Henry VIII during the dissolution of the monasteries. That was between 1536 and 1545. Since that time, the ruins of the abbey have continued to be used by sailors as a landmark on the headland. These dramatic, ominous ruins have inspired many works of fiction. Most notably, they are mentioned in Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, Dracula. In the story, Count Dracula is a creature resembling a large dog which came ashore at the headland, and he runs up the 199 steps to the graveyard of St Mary's Church, which sits in the shadow of Whitby Abbey ruins. The abbey is also described in Mina Harker's diary within the novel. Right over the town is the ruin of Whitby Abbey, which was sacked by the Danes, and which is the scene of part of Marmion, where the girl was built up in the wall. It is a most notable ruin of immense size and full of beautiful and romantic bits. There is a legend there that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. The story she is referring to is that of a young nun called Constance de Beverley, who broke her sacred vows of chastity when she fell in love with a gallant knight called Marmion. When the other nuns found out her secret, her punishment was to be bricked up alive in the walls of the building. However, the white lady in the window is not the nun. She is believed to be Saint Hilda, who founded Whitby Abbey. As well as these ghosts, it is said that a choir of spirits can be heard singing on the 6th of January every year, which used to be the old-fashioned Christmas Day. After walking around the extensive ruins of the Abbey, we decided to return to our car and get ready to find some lunch in Whitby town. Just a word of caution, the toilet facilities at the Abbey are very poorly signposted, and you'll also have to pay to use them. I think it was 40p when we went. So, make sure you have some change available. From the car park, there are great views of the landscape. As well as the Abbey, there's a museum and St Mary's Church in the same location. To be honest, you could spend all day just up there, especially as there's a craft brewery with a bar nearby. Looking down from the cliff, the town didn't seem too busy, but how wrong we were. Coachloads of people, day trippers and locals swarmed the streets, all with food in hand, and this was on a Wednesday. People were sitting outside of the pubs, blocking the pavements in the unseasonably warm weather. We could barely drive down to find a car park. Eventually, we ended up parking in a large area next to the steam railway, and that was just to gather our thoughts. We gave up all hope of finding a fish and chip shop or somewhere that we could eat, and just ended up getting some takeaway sandwiches from a local convenience store. In the meantime, my parents wanted to walk from the Abbey into the town to visit another museum and also track down the road where my ancestors had lived. They came down the famous 199 steps that are mentioned in the Dracula novel, and they said that it was also extremely crowded, which kind of ruined the atmosphere. Having pet dogs is lovely, but in the UK, a lot of beaches have restrictions in place between March and October. This means that you need to check the local council rules about which beaches you can bring your dogs to. If you're caught on the wrong beach, you can receive a fine. In the Whitby area, there are only a couple and none are currently near the town. We decided to drive about half an hour up the coast to visit a small cove called Runswick Bay, which had great reviews and was said to be very picturesque. This would be our dog's first time on the beach, and we were excited to let them explore. But that didn't happen. Don't get me wrong, Runswick is lovely, and the drive from Whitby was very pleasant. Unfortunately, the car park is extremely small, and while we were lucky to find a space, I can imagine at normal or peak hours there would be nowhere at all available. There is no phone signal in the car park as it's in a valley by the cliffs, and we couldn't use a pay point for parking. We didn't have enough coins left from using the bathrooms at Whitby Abbey, and big signs everywhere said that the Runswick Cafe wouldn't exchange notes for parking money. So, after a quick walk around the tiny gravel car park, we got in our car to drive back to our holiday cottage, an hour away. Because we were no longer parked in Whitby, we couldn't use the directions that we already had saved on the sat-nav. As there was no signal, even when we came out of the cove, we had to rely on signposts back to places we knew that were near our village. This turned out to be a whistle-stop tour of some of the most typical Yorkshire villages you could ever imagine. We took a wrong turn and ended up in the middle of the moors on top of a ridge with the dales either side of us. There were sheep everywhere. We hit a pheasant and got caught in a hailstorm, but it was definitely worth it for the views. In summary, I would recommend visiting Whitby Abbey and the visitor attractions on East Cliff. Be prepared for coach parties and lots of tourists, especially on sunny days. Take a walk into Whitby town and again make sure you're ready for lots of people in narrow streets. If you've got dogs with you, it's wise to check in advance what beaches are available. Most importantly, ensure you have enough spare change to use public restrooms and pay for parking. If you're enjoying my Yorkshire videos, why not consider subscribing? I upload regularly and I'm always posting videos of places you can visit within the UK.